All right, for those of you just joining us, hello. Again, my name is Nora Howell. I'm the Public Art Project Manager, and I'm also joined on the call by Ryan Patterson, our Public Art Program Director, and he'll be managing the chat if you have any questions. So for our agenda today, I'm going to kind of give a big picture overview of the panel review process that we use for this grant, and then get into more detail into the actual scoring rubric that is used for this particular grant, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. Feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know who you are, what county are you applying for in the grant, and if you're applying for conservation, new artwork, planning, or project, it helps me to know who's in the room so I can tailor questions and examples to meet your needs. So yeah, please go ahead and say hello in the chat. All right, so quick overview of how the panel scoring process works at the Maryland State Arts Council. So after you submit your grant, it's reviewed by a cohort of panelists. Those panelists apply through an open call. We select panelists from across the state that have some sort of experience in public and visual art. Hi, Lindsay. Those panelists are then receive a stipend, and they review and score every single grant that is eligible for the Public Art Across Maryland program. After they review and provide initial scores for every single grant, they also provide written comments. All of the panelist scores are then averaged. The highest scoring applicants then advance to round 2. In round 2, this is a virtual meeting. It is it's on Google Meet. You can watch. The panelists go through each application, discuss the applications, and then score each application again. This is an open public meeting. You can observe, and then the panelists will receive a round 2 score, and then the round 2 applications are then reviewed. The final awards are determined by the Maryland State Arts Council staff following those round 2 scores. If your application advances to round 2, you will be notified and given that link, but it is an open public meeting. Anyone can observe. I just want to note that if any applications receive the same score and we aren't able to fund everyone, final selections will be based on which applications most closely align with the strategic goals of the Maryland State Arts Council and the determination of the Maryland State Arts Council staff. So after we go through, so that's sort of like the overview of how a grant advances through the scoring process, but I really want to talk to you about the rubric and how the panelist assigns scores to your grant application. So as you are most likely familiar, there are 4 types of Maryland Public Art Across Maryland grants. We have our conservation bucket, our new artwork bucket, and within each of those buckets, there's planning and project grants. For each of those types, 1, 2, 3, 4, they each have their own rubric. And I'm going to talk through some of the rubrics. All 4 of the rubrics are similar, but I do want to clarify that each of them are different. And I'm going to put them into the chat so you can pull up the one that's most relevant to you. And they're all in the chat now, and hoping all those links work. Okay, so there are 4 different rubrics. I'm going to start with the new artwork project grant. I'm going to just do an overview of the rubric, and then we'll get a little bit more into the details. So the project grant application is made up of 6 questions. So you'll see there are 6 components to that rubric. They align directly with the questions in the grant. The first question is worth up to 30 points. This is an opportunity to earn the most points. You really want to invest in that question number 1, and being clear, specific, and detailed. Now, if you look at the rubric, to earn the highest number of points in every question, you'll notice it says it's clear, it's specific, and it's detailed. The number one thing that when I'm giving people feedback about their grants is that it's not as clear as it needs to be. As artists, as creative, your project is likely very clear in your head, and it can be a challenge to get what's in your head and your vision onto paper so that someone who knows nothing about you can understand it with the same clarity as you do. This is probably the greatest challenge of writing these grants and submitting a strong application. So for question number 1, this is true for again, we're looking at the new artwork project grant rubric. All of the rubrics are slightly different, but they have a lot of similarities. So to earn up to 30 points, you need to provide a clear, specific, and detailed written description that aligns with the drawings and communicates strong feasibility. For question number 2, this is the question about describing your community and describing your community engagement. Again, to get the highest number of points, you need to be clear, specific, a detailed description of the community and community engagement that strongly centers and values community input, both in the planning and in the implementation process. Number 3, this is the question where you're explaining your prior experience, and to earn the highest number of points, you need to declare specific, detailed evidence of the experience of the applicant and artist that can communicate strong feasibility to implement the project. Okay, I'm starting to sound like a broken record here. Do you notice everything says clear, specific, detailed for the schedule, the project budget, and the maintenance? Now you'll notice that for the prior experience, project schedule, and project budget, those are only worth up to 15 points, whereas question number 1 was up to 30 points. And it looks like question 2 is cut off here, my apologies, but it's higher, it's 30 points as well. So question number 1 and number 2 have the highest weight as opposed to these following 2 questions, which are fewer points. So let's try it. Let's see, let's pretend for the sake of this moment, everyone on this call is part of the FY25 panel, and you have been tasked with reading the grants and scoring them. So I want you to familiarize yourself with this number 1 rubric, project description. The question that the grantee has to answer is that they have to provide a detailed description of the proposed public art project. They have to include the artwork meaning, the creation and fabrication process, the materials, and their artwork that they submitted should align with their description of the artwork. And to award that a grantee up to 30 points, they have to be clear, specific, and detailed. Okay, so keeping that in mind, I'm going to share with you this is a made-up application for the sake of this call, but I want you to go ahead and read this. If you're able, I will read it aloud for accessibility as well. And then I want you to decide, based on the rubric that I just shared, how many points you would award to this applicant if you were on the panel. So go ahead, take a look. I'll read it momentarily. Okay, so for the project grant for this number 1 question, it says, for the Public Art Across Maryland grant program, I will create a mural on a wall situated at 180 Madison Avenue in Charles County. This work will feature landscape reflecting the flora and fauna of Southern Maryland. To ensure the durability of the mural, I will use 3-layer painting approach. First, a primer paint, followed by an exterior acrylic paint, and seal with anti-graffiti coat. Okay, panel. What score would you give this question number 1? Okay, feel free to put your answers in the chat. All right, I see a 10, I see a 3, I see a 5. Another 5. Anybody else have a different number, 4 than 5? Okay, 5 again. All right, would anyone who put their number in the chat be willing to unmute and explain why they gave it that number? And if they were going to advise this grantee, what they would recommend they do better next time?
Yeah, I gave it probably the lowest score, which is a 3. My name's Dave Hoffman.
Okay.
I'm the director of education and interpretation at the Academy Art Museum in Easton, Maryland. And first off, it's lacking. I mean, while it goes into some detail about the type of medium that's used, it lacks detail about the dimension and as well as like any sort of site specific details aside from the address itself. It doesn't really go into the fabrication and installation process at all. So there's no timeline that's presented or sort of scope of fabrication, and sort of hinge to that. It not to be prescriptive, but it doesn't sort of outline how it might engage the community through the fabrication or design process of the mural. And then the description is rather basic, and the meaning, it references ecology, but the meaning, particularly as ecology relates to the site, isn't really spelled out in any kind of meaningful way.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that great summary. Yeah, to clarify the question in the chat, any kind of community engagement would be in the question number 2, but I do want to point out, as Hoffman just explained, like the artwork meaning and concept, I think they kind of scratched the surface in that, but it would need to be expanded immensely to increase the scores there. And I try to get this to fit on one slide, so it's shorter in nature than an actual application, but I think it serves the point. Okay, great. Thank you all for that feedback, and thank you for that further description. Let's do it again for this applicant. I apologize if, again, I'm trying to squeeze everything into one slide. I'm going to read it aloud for accessibility purpose, but we're going to do the same exercise. So be thinking as you're reading and/or listening what score you would give this applicant. All right, Sylvan Grove Community Alliance is grateful to have received a planning grant for the Assembly Tree Public Art Project located in the Sylvan Grove Neighborhood Park, a highly visible gateway intersection at Carolina and Ransom Roads in Madison, Sylvan, in a large 3-acre green space. SGCA represents approximately 1,000 households and has engaged the Parks Department, who support the installation of the project. The funding will specifically support artist team Studio AZC's sculptural materials, fabrication, transportation to the site, and installation, community engagement activities, and a ribbon-cutting community celebration. The concept for the assembly tree came from an archetypal notion that trees are links between places. Trees symbolize strength, community connection, family, and a spot for shade, and a place of assembly. The tree of life is a symbol that represents the interconnectedness of everything in the universe and is present in mythical traditions of almost every culture. These myths inspired the artist to design a welcoming entryway that will connect areas and encourage people to come together at the Grove Neighborhood Park. Embedded into Park Plaza area is a 2-foot deep and 1-foot diameter concrete foundation designed by our engineer, and the sculptural tree trunk is 6 inches by 6-inch tubular steel that rises 10 feet above the ground with a perpendicular 2-inch tubular steel curved into a branch-like form welded to the top of the trunk. The curved branch extends to either side 4 feet. The steel will be powder-coated red to represent joy, and the green leaf hand-painted with a durable automated paint. On the plaza concrete, welcome will be painted in different languages with pavement paint. All right, let's do it again. Take a moment to review the rubric and let me know, if you were a panelist, how you would score this application. Excellent to outstanding would be 28 to 30, good to very good 18 to 20, satisfactory 8 to 10, fair to marginal 3 to 5. And there is a maximum word count. I don't believe there's a minimum word count in the Smart Simple portal. All right, so in the chat, I'm seeing 30, 25, 28, 20, 20, 20, 20. Okay, would someone who hasn't spoken yet be willing to share what they scored and why, and what they would recommend the grantee to do better?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Cherokee Talagi. I'm a textile artist and designer in Baltimore City, and I scored them a 20. I think that, well, Nora, I can't quite see the drawings, but I'm just presuming that they do have like feasible drawings of what they were talking about, outlining the neighborhood parks, the trees. I think that they definitely talked a lot about their planning process when it comes to the involvement of the community, but also the involvement of the contractors in the neighborhood. They did state who would be funding their planning part of their project, the installation part. Which I thought was very specific. I thought it was clear on the location, and I thought it was very detailed as well. But I think that I would recommend them to have like some more photo representation, maybe even then just to talk more about the impact. They talked about the impact, but really specifically further of like why would they see this as something in their community beyond a green park space. So there were things like that that I felt like they could add depth to their meaning of their project. So that's my opinion.
Wonderful. I really appreciate that insight. Yes, if you had the whole application, you could see their photos, right? This is like the reduced part for the webinar. Yeah, I really want to highlight what you said about the meaning and the impact. So when we're thinking about all of Maryland arts, state art council grants, like this is taxpayer funded money, right? So this is all of our money being invested into art in various ways in our community. So really making that connection about what is the impact, why is it meaningful, why should our collective funds be spent on this particular project is really important for this grant and for increasing your opportunity to get a higher score in the rubric. All right, thank you. Let's move on to a different part of the rubric. So this is question number 2 of a new artworks project grant. The first component of question number 2 is describing your community. Please describe the community that will be impacted by the proposed artwork, including the primary stakeholders who will be involved in and affected. Part B, community engagement. Describe the community engagement that took place during the planning and process. Describe how the community and public will continue to be engaged. We're looking for you to explain the proposed community engagement activities, related activities, any programming, dedication, installation, celebration, and any other activities that might be proposed. And you'll see that this question is a 3 to 20 scale. It's a little bit less than question number 1, but you still an opportunity to get a lot of points towards your application. This scale is still, excellent to outstanding down to fair and marginal. So I do have a sample grant for us to look at. Right, I'm going to read this aloud. The first part of that is just the question. I'm going to get down to what the applicant submitted. The location of the mural is in a high traffic business district. The business owners of the district will be invited to a public paint day in which they can help paint portions of the mural. In advance of the public paint day, I will circulate flyers inviting the public to participate. Okay, so that's what the grantee submitted. What would you score? Would you give them a fair to marginal, a satisfactory, good to very good, excellent to outstanding? Y'all know the routine. Put your scores in the chat. Okay, I'm seeing 3 10s and 8s. So it looks like we're pretty strong in the satisfactory category. Would anybody be willing to share, anyone who hasn't spoken yet, share why they scored and what they would recommend the grantee do better? Nope. 1 5. Okay, so we got most gave it a satisfactory. We got 1 fair to marginal. Anyone willing to share?
I'm happy to share.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Maybe I'm way off with my thinking, but I didn't feel like that the description included how they were centering and valuing like input from the community in this project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I affirm you in that assessment, right? They were like, they're invited to participate. There wasn't necessarily like an exchange or a way for the community to be involved outside of showing up, right? So that is certainly an opportunity for the grantee to expand. So if you look in that satisfactory category, most of you scored, it says some description of community engagement that somewhat centers the values and input. It's a somewhat versus what Liza Marie said, maybe doesn't not demonstrate centering and valuing of a community. So I think this is a great example because when a panel is reviewing, there might be up to 5 people scoring each applicant, and there will be some variation. So some panelists might give you a satisfactory and others might give you a fair to marginal, and then those scores would be averaged out. All right. Okay, we're gonna do this again. This is also a community engagement, and like before, I will read because I realize the font is small. Okay, this is a new this is the same applicant from example number 2, question 1. So community engagement. The neighborhood has had significant input during the public art planning process supported by the PAAM planning grant. We are a culturally and ethnically and multi-generational community. The SGCA was successful in collaborating with multiple county agencies and nonprofit organizations in developing the public artwork. This includes Parks and Recreation and Public Works Department, as well as our local arts council. The SGCA Arts Committee led community input meetings to develop the goals and themes for the public artworks, then issued an open call to the artists for the state of Maryland. 24 applications were received, and 3 semifinalists were paid a $1,000 honorarium from our planning grant to support artwork concept proposals. 2 months later, the 3 semifinalist teams each presented their proposals to the Arts Committee and the community in an open meeting that included bilingual interpreters. Following the presentation, the committee facilitated a feedback and input discussion. For those who could not attend, further input was solicited through surveys, and the Artist Selection Committee selected the overwhelmingly popular assembly tree by studio A to Z. Following the sculpture fabrication and installation, the community will be invited to paint Welcome on the Plaza in multiple languages. Training in proper painting techniques will be held for community residents. Upon completion, the community will be invited to participate in a ribbon cutting celebration at the park. The event will feature Studio AZ, county elected officials, and civic agency partners, and will be widely publicized. All right, so again, here the rubric. What would you all give them as a score? Okay, you got 18, you got a 19, so we're in that excellent to outstanding category. Another 18, all right. Cherokee, okay. Great. Okay, so we look like we're averaging out to excellent to outstanding. Would anyone who hasn't spoken yet be willing to share why they scored, anything they would recommend the grantee improve to even increase their score further? All right, no worries, we'll keep moving. Okay, so I want to do a similar process, but this time for a planning grant, for those who are doing planning grants on the call. The planning grant vary from the project grant, and that is a smaller application. It only has 3 questions, so the rubric, it likewise only has 3 rubrics. So you'll notice some similarities. There's still the first question has the most weight and has the most opportunity to score points. And then the schedule and the budget are each worth up to 15 points. Just like the project grant, everything is about being clear, specific, and detailed.
Hey,
All
Nora.
right. Yeah.
This is Sue Simmons with Caroline County Council of Arts. I really wanted to comment on the last one, but I was having some technical difficulties finding unmuting my thing. So, but I just wanted to say that I rated it high. I thought that they did a fine job. What I thought was interesting that was missing was that they didn't share numbers. So how many surveys did they get? How many folks attended? And that may have been because despite their best efforts, there might have only have been a handful. And, you know, or how did you reach out and invite if you had the capacity to share those kind of details? But it sounds like, you know, they did many of the things. It's just that sometimes the community doesn't always share the same intensity and priority for a project that perhaps those that are building it do, you know.
Yeah.
But I thought that they did a good job in terms of collaborating with existing systems and being present with the community. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for interrupting me. I really appreciate that insight. And yeah, I would affirm that if numbers help you tell a story, you're welcome to include them. They certainly aren't a requirement.
Okay.
Somebody else has their hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? Dave Hoffman again here. So I also just wanted to circle back to the first question on the rubric, and somebody else asked this in the chat too, under the strong feasibility, the extent to which the inclusion of permissions, permits, licensing, etc., is necessary or would support feasibility. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm going back to the full. Okay, so for project grants, for new artwork project grant, you must have a letter of permission that states you can do whatever it is that you're going to do, that you want to do. And that is essential.
Right. And so just real quick, so if I'm a museum and I am commissioning public art on the grounds of the museum, then I can self-deal a letter?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Whoever would be like the
But if I'm like
right person to sign it.
crosswalks, but if I'm like painting crosswalks in a small community on the Eastern Shore, then I'll want like letters of permission from whatever the Transportation Commission, so on and so forth, that regulates. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, transportation, whatever your equivalent local jurisdiction calls it, typically Department of Transportation, you need a letter. If you're working in a park, you likely need something from Parks and Recreation. If you are representing
that's the project, but it would planning is presumably assists with all that, right? Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that is not a requirement of the planning grant. Bouncing around here. So the planning grant, you do not need to have any attachments. But for the project grant, you do. Ryan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I know Kathy has her hand up as well. Kathy, why don't you go ahead, and then I'll just want to add one more technical piece of it.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you, Ryan. I had the understanding that we could actually be in the process of acquiring letters of permission or permits. The project we're working on, for example, will have to go all the way to the state level for permissions, possibly because the project is on a state highway, which is unusual for a main street in the county. And that we've already been told that will require many hours of work and possibly months up to, months to accomplish. Can we describe where we're at in the process? Who has been contacted, from whom we're awaiting official written permission, etc.?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk exactly to that point on the technical level. A lot of times, a formal right of entry or permit is a legal document that the city or county or municipality may be hesitant to go all the way into processing if you don't know that you have the funding in place or the project seems that feasible. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Like your feasibility is the permission. They don't consider it feasible until you have the money to do it. So for us, we would recommend going as high as you can or to the best authority you can to get at least a letter of support stating that they're willing to work with you if the grant is received. And you do the best you can, right? If it's a crosswalk and it touches 6, property owners and the state runs the street and the county runs the sidewalk, maybe, that's a couple of letters. If it's a park property, maybe it needs to be the park. If your museum's owned by your city, maybe you need the city involved. But, each project is going to be very nuanced, but try to get the letter of support from the people that manage that property and at least the state that they're willing to work with you if you get the grant.
That's great, Ryan. Thank you so much. That's a big relief because that's where we're headed. And so we're on the right course. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, just one more.
Dave.
Yeah, and just, also underscoring that circular quality that it was highlighted there. So that's really helpful. But so, if I'm an organization and I am, can a grant be filled? Can a grant be a partnership between multiple organizations?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Yeah, you can list
Yep.
partners in your grant.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you for those juicy questions. We're going to do a planning grant rubric just because it varies a little bit more. It's just fewer questions and hopefully a little bit simpler to submit if you're still in that planning phase. Okay, so I have an example planning grant submission here, and I will read it out loud, and then just to familiarize yourself again with this rubric. Again, it's a 3 to 30 scale, so similar but slightly different criteria than the project grant. All right.
Well, after you finish reading, Nora, I'll ask it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Sharpie. Okay. NCDC, a nonprofit organization focused on downtown Maryland city revitalization, seeks the Public Art Across Maryland Planning Grant to enhance its Main Street district. Public art is integral to the economic growth, community identity, and attracting new residents. With a history of successful art projects, the NCDC aims to install impactful public art aligning with ongoing redevelopment in the Main Street business district. In collaboration with the town, the NCDC plans extensive community engagement. A survey targeting 5% of the population will seek public input on mural location, style, and theme. A public art selection committee made of key stakeholders will guide engagement efforts. Post-survey, the committee will analyze data and oversee the artist selection process. The artist selection involves a call to artists, advertising through diverse channels, a comprehensive review process by the selection committee. 3 finalists will present detailed mural designs at the Art in Parks event, inviting public comment. The committee will use the feedback to determine the winning design, which will be announced through various media outlets. The top 3 artists will receive $25,000 each for their design efforts, with the selected design eligible for a future Public Art Across Maryland project grant application. This inclusive approach aims to create visually appealing public spaces, foster community pride, and contribute to the town's economic growth. All right, so with that, how would you score this grant application? Remember that for for the planning grant, you're looking for goals, description of the community, goals for engaging said community, how the engagement will take place, and if there is an artist selected, the description of the artist selection process.
Nora, would you mind just flashing back to the description? Thank you.
All right, you got one score. Any other thoughts? Okay. Some of our highest scores of the day, the midline scores. All right. Would anyone who hasn't shared yet be willing to share their perspective on why they scored and if there's anything the grantee could improve?
Oh, is it okay if I go
Yep,
even
go ahead.
ask a question? Okay. I would say I thought it was very well written, very well planned. My one concern was I didn't see anything about diversity and inclusion. And that would be, if I were a panelist, I would be wondering about that. So that's why I gave it a slightly lower score than some.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I think that that's a really important point and value, and I'm so glad you brought this up. So diversity and inclusion is not explicitly stated in our rubric, so it wouldn't be grounds for awarding or not awarding points. But what you can be looking for is in their community engagement process, are they being inclusive in how they're approaching it? Are they providing the survey in different formats so that people of different abilities, locations, digital access have opportunity to engage? Are they considering, if it's a digital survey, but their target community doesn't use computers that much, then that wouldn't be a good alignment of process, right? Maybe they need to hand out paper surveys. So those are ways that we're looking for grantees to consider those values and being sure that whoever their community is, they get to describe it, you get to define who your community is, but the engagement considers how to meaningfully engage with that defined community. Okay. All right. So I have a few more of these, but I think we will move on. So I really want to make sure we have time for questions. So our Public Art Across Maryland grant is due December 19th. There's only one grant cycle this fiscal year. If you want staff feedback to review your grant, we need to, first, you need to put your application information into the grant portal, Smart Simple, and then request feedback. You can email us. The easiest way is to just submit your name through this form. I get a little notification and I can get in there and read it. So I just want to open it up. This is an opportunity to ask additional questions, anything about the PAAM grant that would prepare you to submit the best application possibly can on the 19th. And I'm going to end the recording. You can ask questions freely and okay. Feel free to